Thanks for joining us for another edition of Northwest Newsweek. I'm Mitchell Ringos. Ontario's Natural Resource Minister was in Atikokan on Friday to announce a $19.6 million fund for projects that expand forest biomass usage around the province. Graydon Smith says the forest sector is already deeply integrated, but they want to find more opportunities for companies and First Nations to take advantage of unused wood fiber.
The forest sector is critical to Ontario's economy and success, critical to the communities it supports, like right here in Atikokan.
Smith made the announcement at the Biopower Sustainable Energy Plant, which produces wood pellets for many different purposes, including the creation of electricity at the Atikokan Generating Station. The Ford government previously created a forest biomass action plan, where stakeholders provided input on how to maximize the use of sawdust, shavings, and wood waste for new products and energy uses. Smith says they're now putting funding behind that plan.
That's why today I'm pleased to announce the Forest Biomass Program. Through this program, we're providing an initial investment of close to $20 million for funding to projects that will expand our wood harvest from Crown Forests, support the forest sector's role as a creator of good jobs that build strong communities.
We are proud to be a partner in the local economy, supporting the Atikokan Ontario Power Generation biomass fuel generating station just to the north, as well as the area sawmills and forestry operations to ensure that future generations can continue to thrive and support their families, harvesting our responsibly managed sustainable natural resources.
Applications to the Forest Biomass Program will start being accepted early this summer. Northern Development Minister Greg Rickford made a number of funding announcements in his riding this week. On Wednesday, he announced $1.3 million in NOHFC funding for economic development. $842,000 of that is going to a Kenora company to establish an aggregate screening facility, and just shy of $500,000 will help revamp the Kenora Golf and Country Club. Also this week, he visited the Rainy River District for 2 more announcements. Lee Noonan was there.
Greg Rickford, the Minister for Northern Development and Indigenous Affairs, announced $592,000 in new funding for Rainy River from the Homelessness Prevention and Indigenous Supportive Housing Programs, roughly doubling the DSAB's 2023-2024 funding allocation for a total of $1.13 million.
Homelessness, as we all know, is a very serious problem in Fort Frances and indeed in the Rainy River District and right across the province. I would say it is one of the most difficult problems that we are facing and is approaching a crisis point here and in the province.
Fort Frances Mayor Andrew Halikas expressed his gratitude, particularly highlighting the importance of flexible funding that can be directed by communities where they see the most need.
While some of the issues remain the same as between towns and cities, there are some nuances, but one consistent thing is the opportunity. And the opportunity is to make responsible and appropriate interventions.
Some of the funding will be used to fill staffing needs, but the bulk of it will be used to create more housing. With the completion of a 6-bed transitional housing facility at 324 Victoria Avenue, which already houses a warming shelter and safe bed program. It will also help fund 6 new 8-plexes, similar to the existing River Ridge apartments, although the new units at the St. Michael's School site will be significantly bigger. Both projects were already in the works, but CAO Dan McCormick says the funding will be instrumental in getting the new apartment project off the ground.
Without this funding, a small district like us couldn't survive. We just don't have the capacity in a small region with only 20,000 people. Like I said, you ask everybody for $1 and you get $20,000, so it doesn't really go very far. So.
Rickford also made a stop in Lavallee to announce over $110,000 from the NOHFC to upgrade the community hall there.
We're out making sure that every community member can access, and for Lavallee that's going to include upgrades to the stage with a new floor, repave the walkway, upgrade the public washrooms, put some of that infrastructure in there that supports electricity and water.
Lee Noonan, TBT News.
OPP are investigating a fatal collision on Highway 17 just west of Kenora. Emergency responders arrived at the scene near the Burma Road intersection at about 9 o'clock Monday night. The crash involved 2 sport utility vehicles and a pickup truck. 24-year-old Winnipeg woman in one of the SUVs was pronounced dead at the scene. The driver and passenger in the other SUV sustained serious but non-life-threatening injuries and were taken to hospital. That section of Highway 17 was fully reopened at around 11 o'clock Tuesday morning while the OPP continued to investigate. A major fire destroyed home on Hilly Lake near Kenora on Wednesday evening. No injuries have been reported as a result of the fire, which appears to have been caused by a wood-burning stove. Longbow Lake Fire Brigade was the first to arrive on scene, but Kenora Fire Chief David Pratt says their crews were called in for mutual aid along with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. Pratt says the fire had spread to a nearby trailer, vehicles, and a wildland area. An M&R helicopter responded to waterbomb the surrounding area and prevent the fire from spreading. Pratt says Kenora Fire and the M&R joined the effort at around 8 p.m. and together the 3 fire services had the blaze out by around midnight. 12 commemorative medals were minted in 1873 to mark the signing of Treaty 3. Now, in the year of the 150th anniversary of the treaty, one of those medals has been returned to Rainy River First Nations. Lee Noonan has that story.
150 years ago, the chiefs who signed Treaty 3 were presented with a medal, and for years, former Rainy River First Nations chief Jim Leonard had heard rumors that one was still in the region. He eventually learned that the medal was real, on display at the Fort Frances Museum, and to his great surprise, on loan from his close friend Ted Brocky.
But my sister and I, Helen Wyszynski, thought it was about time, especially 150 years later, that the medallion saw its rightful home.
Brocky presented the medal to current Chief Marcel Medicine Horton at the community's annual fish fry.
This medal could have been touched by Chief Malwin Dalpanes back in the day. It could have been touched by any one of those former chiefs 150 years ago. And to stand here with the chieftainship, sorry. There's no higher honor.
It's something that we have striven from for many, many years, is to be good friends with our neighbors. And this is, one of the highlights of my life is to dream about this medal for many, many years and to finally see it coming home.
Rainy River First Nations has now entrusted the medal to Kanachiwanung, its historical center. Manager Jesse Richards says the medal is in pristine condition and preserving it will be a top priority for the center.
This medal is a very significant part of our collection, and it's going to fuel the interest and passion of history of our next generations. It's going to allow researchers to come and study it and see something in the flesh, because the only other ones that we really know about are in the Archives of Canada.
Kanachiwanung is commissioning a replica which will be on display there. The original will be housed in a vault that's temperature and humidity controlled and will only be accessible to members of the community and the public by appointment. Lee Noonan, TBT News.
Federal agency has decided that an impact assessment is required for the controversial Northern Road Link project in the Ring of Fire region. The Northern Road Link would connect the proposed Martin Falls Community Access Road and the proposed Webequie Supply Road. The Impact Assessment Agency of Canada believes the project could have negative impacts within federal jurisdiction, including potential effects on wildlife and the rights, health, social, and economic conditions of Indigenous peoples. The project is supported by Martin Falls and Webequie First Nations, but has received pushback, most notably from Neskantaga First Nation. After the break, we'll have a story on the Ontario Health Coalition's, quote, People's Referendum on Privatized Healthcare. Welcome back, and like we were saying before the break, the Thunder Bay Health Coalition began collecting votes from the public on Friday for what it's calling a people's referendum against the Ford government's Bill 60. The bill allows private clinics to take on more procedures from hospitals. The Ontario Health Coalition believes this is one step closer to privatized health care in the province. Voting booths were set up at locations around Thunder Bay and the region, where those with an opinion about Bill 60 can cast a ballot saying yes or no to the question, do you want our public hospital services to be privatized to for-profit hospitals and clinics? The two-day voting process ends Saturday with more than 100,000 online ballots cast province-wide before the end of the first day. Local Health Coalition co-chair Jules Tupker says their efforts to gain support extends across the Northwest region.
Fort Frances, they can cast a ballot at the Safeway store and at the Canadian Tire, at the Beaver Mills market in Rainy River. In Scarborough, they can vote at the Town Hall and Zechner's store. In Terrace Bay, they can vote at the Town Hall also, the Recreation Center, which is all the same building. In Scarborough also, where people vote on a regular for the provincial and municipal and federal elections, at the same location there. So there's in Red Rock, you can vote at the Legion.
Close to 1,000 voting stations have been set up province-wide. All votes are planned to be counted on Sunday, with results announced on Tuesday and delivered to Queen's Park on Wednesday. Canada's health minister was in Thunder Bay this week for a major funding announcement to help limit the spread of bloodborne and infectious diseases in the north. Jean-Yves Duclos was at Elevate NWO to provide millions of dollars for a program called Strengthening Peer Engagement for Northern Ontario. Carl Langdon reports.
No one government, and certainly not the federal government, and no single organization can reduce the health impact of sexually transmitted and bloodborne infections alone.
That spread of sexually transmitted and bloodborne illnesses has seen a notable rise in Northern Ontario, with a significant portion of new infections coming as a result of a lack of access to safe supplies for illicit drug users, who, when faced with challenges obtaining supplies, may fall back on decisions that ultimately put them at greater risk. It's for this reason that social issues relating to the spread of infectious disease are so heavily linked to the use of illicit drugs.
People who are living with or at risk of HIV, Hep C, overdose, or other harms prefer to get their information from peers and from family. Our project seeks to put that education and that information into the hands of people who have lived experience.
Gonvay says a network of trusted peer support workers often makes the difference between an individual seeking support or not, and provides opportunities for service organizations to extend warnings, as well as information on safer practices to drug dealers that they normally would have no way of contacting.
You could well imagine that most drug dealers are not going to let me into their apartment if I go knocking on their door, right? One of our peers was very active in their substance use, and they were able to talk to some local drug dealers who didn't know that they needed to wipe down scales or change gloves.
Well, it's a great initiative. It's about $2.6 million for a range of stakeholders, including Elevate NWO, which we know is central in the fight against what we call sexually transmitted diseases, also bloodborne diseases.
One of the other recipients was the Sioux Lookout First Nations Health Authority. That agency is getting more than $1.6 million for a project to connect on-reserve First Nations youth to peer support opportunities and networks. The project will provide health education, support harm reduction, and connect youth with needed services. It will also work to enable a more inclusive and supportive environment for youth and members of the 2SL LGBTQ+ community. Carl Langdon, TBT News.
Much needed long-term care extension at the Nipissing Hospital has been in the works for years, but still has no firm construction date as hospital officials continue to navigate new funding structures, shifting government policies in two different provincial ministries.
And it's like the township, they keep saying to me, Kathy, when do you think, because we'll do this and we'll do this and we want to be ready. But I don't have a date yet. Right?
Hospital CEO Kathy Eady says a lack of clarity around funding has complicated the planning process. She says funding for the long-term care expansion was requested in 2019 and provincially approved in 2021 under a Ministry of Health program that has since been discontinued. Edie says she's now working with the Ministry of Long-Term Care to work out how the beds should be funded. In the meantime, the delays mean growing cost and lost opportunity.
There was this fabulous funding offer they offered, which now the ministry is very busy working with all the organizations that were able to make an application to say they would get shovels in the ground by August 31st of this year. And there was funding that came with that. We were hopeful, but because ours is more complex and we have the acute care build as well, we probably won't make that.
The complexity comes with the construction of a new acute care wing that would connect the hospital to the nearby family health clinic. The long-term care expansion will then connect the existing long-term care wing to the old acute care wing, which will be converted into more long-term care, more than doubling the capacity from 22 to 52 beds. The added capacity is needed now, but as things stand, Edie doesn't expect they'll break ground until 2025. Tough love for Fort Frances Council this week as they've heard the results of a governance review. We'll have their response after the break. Welcome back. A governance review of the town of Fort Frances has found room for growth with below optimal results on 3 governance principles. The town council commissioned the review and responded positively to the report delivered at this week's regular council meeting.
We want to do a good job. We want to govern our municipality in the best possible and most efficient way that we can. And so we always want to try and improve. And so I'm really excited about the review. I think it's an excellent report.
Mayor Andrew Halakis says the town's governance structures have been the same since the 1990s and says it's high time the town changes to reflect a changing society. The report from KPMG professional consultants included a number of recommendations in 3 broad categories, looking at governance structure, roles, and processes. The mayor says he agrees with every recommendation, and for him, increasing transparency is a top priority.
I don't think that we have done as good a job, and not just this council, previous councils going back many years, I don't think have done a really good job in terms of consulting with the public to make sure we're carrying out their wishes because we are their creatures, they elected us. And then also when they have issues with a policy or the way we do business, they should have a really clear venue for registering their complaints, and then there should be a process in place.
Perhaps the most dramatic suggestion in the report, and the issue that provoked the most debate, was the recommendation to reduce the number of council meetings and reduce or eliminate committee of the whole and executive committee meetings in order to free up councillor and administrator time for other matters. Council voted unanimously to accept the report and instructed administration to draft a plan for implementation. Fully implementing the recommendations will take some time, says the mayor, but some of these smaller changes could happen sooner. Since 2011, the town of Marathon has included 2 high school students on their municipal council through a program they say is a model for youth inclusion that more municipalities should adopt. Marathon students' counselors are sworn for 1-year terms, and although they can't vote, they can't perform any of a counselor's other duties. They're expected to report to council on issues and events at the high school and among their peers. Ollie Zellick is one of Marathon's current student counselors, and they say the student counselors have been responsive to the perspective brought by the students, sometimes seeing a real impact on council decisions.
I like knowing that the community values youth voice and values our opinions. I think it's a super important thing for a community to do. I think that youth drive a community forward and keep them focused on the future and not complacent with how things are, but constantly improving. And I think that just people listening to my voice when I have something to say about picking up garbage is a sign that we as a community are focused on moving forward and making our town better.
From the leadership that they presented this year and the years past, have also opened up the doors for other youth in the community because they feel comfortable coming to council and bringing reports on something they'd like to see change in the municipality. So that's wonderful when you see a 10 or 11-year-old student coming to council and doing a presentation on what they'd like to see, a new bike trail or a sports park, a ramp, skate parks, some enhancements here or there. So it's been a total win-win-win.
Mayor Rick Dumas says the town continues to benefit from the involvement of students, and he encourages other municipalities to consider implementing a student counselor program of their own. Thunder Bay area group opposing Hydro One's proposed Waasigan transmission line is concerned about the project's draft environmental assessment. The group is claiming there was no meaningful consultation with the impacted community and are calling for a halt to the review process until their concerns are addressed. Celios Bellos reports.
Kaministiqua's Neighbors on the Line group are not satisfied with Hydro One's recently released draft environmental assessment for the proposed Waasigan transmission line.
Knowing your neighbors and supporting your neighbors is one of the most important things that I believe in my lifetime has become part of Kaministiquia.
Members of the community directly affected, along with those just there to support neighbors, were on hand to discuss the findings of the draft EA. The group is objecting the assessment based on impacted landowners and communities not being properly consulted until months prior to the release, despite the process beginning in 2019. Neighbors on the Line organizer Michelle Hamer believes Hydro One's environmental assessment does not address all those affected by the line.
They do not recognize a home or landowner that's 50 meters on the other side of the line as being impacted. That is not acceptable, and I would suggest it's a serious deficiency in this current draft EA.
The group has already proposed their own alternative route for the transmission line to limit community impact, with members again stressing their frustration with Hydro One's option.
They could have gone around this community if they really wanted to, but they didn't, because they went the shortest and the cheapest way. They didn't take the people into consideration at all.
Members also claim that after submitting concerns to Hydro One, there was no record of them in the draft environmental assessment, including specific watersheds, ponds, and wells.
How are they supposed to give an appropriate and a reasonable review of an EA that's not complete?
The Ministry of the Environment now has a 45-day window to review Hydro One's draft EA. Neighbors on the Line are calling for that review to stop immediately until their concerns are addressed. Hydro One released a statement after the meeting saying, quote, We continue to listen to feedback during the development of the Waskin Transmission Line project and find solutions where possible and address concerns. Following the public review period, Hydro One will make adjustments to the draft EA based on feedback received from the community and submit a final report to the Ministry of the Environment. Vasilios Bellos, TBT News.
That's all the time we have for this edition of Northwest News Week. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.